Aloha. My name is Jacqueline Ashwell, and I'm the superintendent for World War II Valor in the Pacific National Monument, home of the USS Arizona Memorial. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoy today's live stream of the National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day commemoration, marking the 74th anniversary of the attacks on Pearl Harbor and Oahu.
I hope the United States will keep out of this war. I believe that it will.
アメリカはかくてここに新ビンソン法案の成立を見るに至った。言うまでもなくそれは太平洋を渡って侵攻戦とするに必要なる艦隊の整備に他ならず、あくまでも我に対して5対3の比率を幾千とする無用の大軍備、実に25隻の主力艦を要する膨大海軍力のそれである。これに応戦する帝国海軍の花、上海特別陸戦隊。
れに呼応して海軍陸戦隊は東シナ海の激浪を侵して陳海敵前上陸を決行。各手羽が猛進を阻むすべなく、敵は早くも快走。陸戦隊の精鋭は雪崩を打って上陸しました。
We did a lot of hard work and did a lot of training. Maybe the weekends we would get Sunday or Saturday and Sunday off, or we can go to Honolulu and be able to go to the beach or have something to eat, something like that.
I was 18 years old, so, I was thinking of only one thing, doing my job on board ship and then going to the beach and surfing. That was paradise.
Sometimes during maneuvers, the sidewalk in front of our store was a sea of white, and all the Navy, the sailors in their white suits, came down out from the train station.
Pearl Harbor was always full of American ships. Next to Pearl Harbor, we had Hickam Field and Schofield out by Wahiawa, so there were lots of military bases.
We trained for dive bombing. Marines is quite good in dive bombing, and we had utility squadron that I was in. I was a mechanic on J2F, that's a Grumman. They make an awful lot of noise on takeoff. They carried them on a lot of ships too.
I went to work as a mechanic in 4th Reconnaissance Squadron in Hickam Field. I'd take care of the airplane, await the pilot and the crew to come out, and they'd put into airtime and simulate some of the activities that they would go through if they were at war.
I was in a communication part of the infantry. Our job was to lay telephone lines, get things ready for the outposts that were alongside the beaches to our headquarters.
The squadron that I was in flew PBYs, primarily built especially for submarine patrol duty. They were slow, but they were real sturdy. Fly out about 1,500 miles and back. We were looking for submarines.
オアフ島というのはアメリカの太平洋艦隊の一大根拠地で、ほとんどそこにアメリカの大艦隊がいつも常駐しておるし、アメリカがこの太平洋をそれによって睨んでいるというようなふうに感じておりました。
There was to be only one battle fleet in Pearl at a time. We had 3 battle fleets out there, meaning 2 battle fleets would be at sea, constant practicing. Admiral Kimmel had us out there training that we were going to meet the Japanese fleet at sea.
The Japanese were moving in Manchuria and China, and so current events, and especially as they were shown on movie tone news at the movie house and cinema, kept people, I think, aware that there was global tension.
当時日本が中国に進出をした当時からアメリカ主導の ABC で包囲網という日本をいろいろと干渉することがありまして、その頃から毎日この ABC で包囲網がますます日本に対する圧迫度が高まればアメリカと一戦戦わざるを得ないだろうというような雰囲気になっておりました。
Everybody knew what was going on in China. We had had years before kids come to our school who were the children of missionaries or other people working in China who had evacuated from China because of the Japanese invasion.
I had learned enough about world affairs that I was pretty well informed on the war that had already started in Europe and the aims of the Japanese in the East. I knew there was friction between the United States and Japan. I didn't know that it was anywhere near an actual attack.
の人の人がやっぱり入港したらば他の船もどんどん集まってきてるわけです。これは通じゃないなと、これね、簡単な練習にしてもおかしいと思ってたんです。そしたら26日の朝出港する時にそういう一瞬があって艦長からただいまから米国に向けて行動を起こすと。
We took extra precautions on our training schedule. We went darkened ship at night, for instance. We did more gunnery practice, more drills, and that sort of thing. And there was a tension building. Then when diplomats at least talked about conditions easing off in Washington, we all thought that we were relieved somewhat and things were settling down. Nothing was going to happen.
I was very aware of the deliberations going on in Washington, D.C. in the 40s, I think in 1941. And so I thought that as long as they were talking, that there would be no war. And that was my firm belief.
I have a contact. Target is 41 miles, 335 degrees.
Got it. 41 miles, 335 degrees.
Target is 33 miles, 333 degrees.
33 miles, 333 degrees.
What is that?
was almost dawn. Aircraft engines sputtered, then roared. Aviators climbed into cockpits. 6 aircraft carriers turned into a stiff wind. In 20 minutes, 183 planes thundered off the decks and into the darkness. It was 6:15 a.m., December 7, 1941. The first wave of the Japanese attack headed south. 50 minutes later, the second wave. 167 more planes jumped skyward into the morning light. The attack force was on the brink of achieving the improbable, surprise. The idea came from Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. War between Japan and the United States seemed inevitable. But Japan had little chance of winning unless the U.S. fleet in Hawaii could be destroyed. For a year, Yamamoto and his staff worked on a secret plan. Knock out the fleet, cripple American air power, conquer the Southwest Pacific before the U.S. could recover. A huge task force had to sail undiscovered in radio silence for over 4,000 miles, 12 days. Aircraft carriers would send out 2 waves of planes to strike in tandem with 5 midget submarines launched from large submarines stationed south of Oahu. It was a bold gamble. Oahu was the home of the American fleet, the strategic hub of the entire Pacific. The island was rich in targets, but the attack faced the formidable air power of Oahu's 6 airfields. Yet 350 planes now soared toward the island. So far, no one had come to stop them. It was a quiet Sunday morning at Pearl Harbor, but there were signs. Warnings had come from Washington. War with Japan was imminent. Many expected a Japanese attack, but not here, not on Oahu. Early that morning, the American destroyer Ward spotted a partially submerged craft outside the harbor. It was one of the midget submarines. The Ward fired twice, then upon passing, dropped a barrage of 4 depth charges. A few minutes later, 7:02 a.m., 2 privates at the Opana radar station saw a bright spike rise on the screen. The sighting was the biggest that they had ever seen. But a lieutenant told them not to worry. Some B-17 bombers were due in from the U.S. mainland. That was probably all it was. Not far away, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leading the first wave of 183 planes, knew he was close to Oahu, but clouds blocked his view. Then suddenly, there it was. Blue water, white surf, an island like a green jewel. Minutes later, Fuchida spotted it through his binoculars. Over 185 vessels, a row of battleships tethered in pairs. It was 7:53. Fuchida's radio man transmitted a coded telegraph message. Tora, Tora, Tora. It meant complete surprise achieved. Air bases first. The Japanese plan was meticulous and systematic. Crush American air power before it can get off the ground. Strike the American fighter planes first to gain control of the air. Then hit the long-range patrol planes and bombers so the Japanese task force at sea could not be located and attacked. Dive bombers came screaming down to bomb and then strafe. Then fighter planes, machine guns and cannons blazing. Neat rows of American planes burst into flame. The attack struck air bases at Wheeler Field, then Kaneohe Bay, Pearl Harbor, Hickam Field, Eva, and later Bellows. The placid Sunday was a sudden inferno. At 7:58, a radio operator at Pearl Harbor flashed out the message in plain English. Air raid, Pearl Harbor. This is no drill. Too late. The Japanese had command of the air. In 15 devastating minutes, they'd crippled American air power in Hawaii. Just before 8 o'clock, 16 torpedo bombers dipped down and spread out, flying less than 50 feet above the water. The ships below prepared for morning colors. Military bands prepared to play the Star-Spangled Banner. A sailor looked up and wondered why the Army was holding a drill on a Sunday. But it was no drill. Torpedoes dropped into the water at close range and churned toward the ships. The U.S. Navy believed the harbor was too shallow for torpedoes, but not for these. The Japanese had made torpedoes that could be launched in 40 feet of water. On ship after ship, a roar below decks, a lurch, a huge water geyser 600 feet into the air, then a choking cloud of vapor, oil, and smoke. Torpedoes ripped holes below. The battleships West Virginia and Oklahoma each took 9 in the gut. 2 more blasted California. Another struck Nevada. Oklahoma listed sharply. Water rose. Emergency lights went out. Men trapped below cried out in darkness. Above them, more torpedoes slammed home. but half the American battleships seemed safe, those on the inside of the moored piers, and the thick armor plating on their decks would surely protect them from above. But Fuchida's high-level bombers each carried a single bomb, especially modified to pierce that armor. At 8 it happened. A bomb crashed through Arizona's deck and penetrated the forward magazine. The magazine exploded. The ship ripped apart. A ball of fire and smoke rose over 500 feet in the air. The harbor was filled with scenes from hell. Men dove from blazing ships and swam to Ford Island, soaked with oil, their bodies burned, shocked. The first wave had succeeded. By 8:30, the planes headed back toward their carriers. Mitsuo Fuchida was satisfied. In 20 minutes, his attackers had crippled the striking power of the Pacific Fleet. He'd lost, in return, 9 planes. For nearly a half hour, the skies over Oahu were empty. Was it over? Not yet. Just before 9 o'clock, the second wave of Japanese planes filled the air. But again, the fighters and bombers raked airfields and air stations. Bombs exploded on the ships at Pearl Harbor. The objective of the second wave was to finish off any battleships and to destroy any American aircraft that might retaliate against the Japanese fleet at sea. In the first wave, there'd been little time to fight back, but this time, despite their losses, the Americans were ready. Machine guns chattered from the ground. Anti-aircraft fire pocked the sky. A few American pilots got fighter planes into the air. The dogfights began. 20 attacking planes fell from the sky. The battleship Nevada tried to escape by sailing to sea. 23 dive bombers swarmed to attack her. After 5 direct hits, the badly damaged ship was purposefully run aground to keep the entrance channel to the harbor clear. Fires ignited by a direct hit on the destroyer Shaw detonated the forward magazine, ripping her bow completely off. Finally, the planes wheeled and flew away. It was almost 10 a.m. After 2 short and very long hours, it was over. 21 American vessels were sunk or seriously damaged. 188 planes destroyed. By nightfall, 1,158 Americans were wounded, and 2,390 people were dead. 49 civilians, too, died that day, most from friendly fire. The Japanese lost just 29 planes, 5 midget submarines, and 64 men. Their improbable surprise had worked, with one hitch. No American aircraft carriers had been in port. Pearl Harbor was not a knockout blow, but the bold Japanese attack had changed warfare forever. Naval air power, not battleships, would dominate the conflict to come. The next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
As he spoke, the Arizona still burned. Desperate rescue workers still struggled to cut through to crew members trapped in the capsized Oklahoma. The last survivor was pulled out that same afternoon. 500 miles away, the Japanese task force was steaming home through a heavy mist. The crews were strangely quiet. The Pacific War had begun.
distinguished honor of presenting the President of the United States.
Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at solicitation of Japan, still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese